This is Monocle on Fashion, a show on Monocle Radio offering exclusive insights and global perspectives on the fashion industry. I'm Natalie Theodosi, your host and Monocle's fashion director. And this week, I sit down with Racil Chalhoub, womenswear designer and founder of her eponymous label, Racil. One of the most interesting things about launching Monocle on Fashion and having so many conversations with designers and creative directors is that certain themes have quickly emerged. Perhaps the most dominant one is recalibration, necessitated by the pandemic. The brands which are now thriving are the ones which took 2020 as an opportunity to throw away the playbook of fashion business and redefine their terms. The Lebanese designer Racil Chalhoub did just that. She characterizes her brand before and after 2020 as Racil 1.0 and Racil 2.0. You may well remember Racil 1.0. The label became an overnight success when it launched in 2015, offering tuxedos for women crafted with Savile Row tailors. From this starting point, the brand grew rapidly, in part thanks to Racil's previous experience running a concept store in Beirut. As a buyer, she knew firsthand what appealed to wholesalers, and by 2020 the brand was carried by over 50 retailers. But today, you'll only find Racil in 5 major retail points around the world. Racil 2.0 is predominantly sold direct to consumer, and it's made up of pieces designed to take you through life, not just the season. In our conversation, Racil talks about the journey to 2.0 from the very beginning, the influence of Beirut and Paris on her designs, and the lessons she learned by breaking the fashion business rules. Let's hear from Racil.
I guess I embarked in this fashion journey a long time ago. I guess it goes as far as I can remember. I fell in love with fashion as a child, growing up with my mom, and I think the day she took me to a fashion show when I was 10 years old, that's when I knew I wanted to work in that industry. And I never even looked at anything else afterwards, so I knew that that was my path. So I studied, after battling with my parents, I studied fashion design and fashion marketing. So I did a double major, and then after that I had an internship at YSL. And then I moved to Beirut, which is where I'm originally from, and I opened a concept store with my childhood best friend. So we basically took an old Lebanese house and we turned it into a boutique cafe and a bakery. So I was in charge of the boutique side. So starting my career as a buyer, sourcing new brands, curating collections, and putting things together that was more of a retail experience. So that's how I started. And then a few years later, I basically had the itch to design. I knew that at some point I would design. And then it happened, and that's when I embarked on the second journey.
And it's interesting that you say it was almost innate and you knew straight from such a young age that this is what you wanted to do. And I wonder, of course, your mother sounds like was one of the biggest influences, but is your Lebanese heritage and spending time in Beirut part of it as well, just because it's such an incredible city and it's somewhere where people really take care of how they dress, how they present themselves, and have a very unique approach to fashion. So how did that influence you?
I mean, that influenced me in the aesthetics of my collections, I guess. But I grew up in Paris, so I grew up with that side of fashion as well, which is incredible. So I'm very lucky to have grown up around women that were always impeccably dressed. You know how French women are. So, it kind of levels everything up. So I started with that. And then I had the Lebanese influence. And I think that's what shaped the aesthetics of my collections, as I was saying, because when I moved to Beirut, my life was very social. So people go out a lot. They take care of themselves a lot. You shop for going out outfits more than you do for your day-to-day. So they don't really look at an investment piece in terms of, I'm going to buy this blazer and wear it all the time. They look at, I have 6 amazing parties to attend. I need 6 new dresses. And so in what I call a Racil 1.0, I started with the tuxedos for women, and my idea was to really sort of develop this alternative evening wear brand where, yes, you're going to all of these events and it's super glam, but how am I going to make it a little cooler? And how am I going to make this wardrobe to work for me a little bit more? And so that's the first sort of path I went down in. So the aesthetics and I guess the way of life was a big inspiration. But also it's just the Lebanese mentality for me is probably the biggest influence from where I'm from.
Yeah, I mean, if you're between Paris and Beirut, I can't imagine not having fashion as part of your life.
No, 100%.
And tell me about the experience of being a buyer as well, and how that, what you learned from it, how that shaped you, because I guess you worked with a lot of younger designers, you could touch and feel product, understand the market much more. So especially at that time, what was retail like, and what did you learn by buying other designers first?
So I really enjoyed that time, that part of my career. I loved being a buyer, but I still have that in me. You know, I love edits, I love to curate, I love to choose, I love to put together selections. And what was amazing was being able to see what designers were creating firsthand, and then being able to tell, you know what, I believe in this, I'm going to go for this, I'm going to buy this. So when I opened this concept store in Beirut, there was nothing of its kind actually in the Middle East, because it was mostly brands that were already well known. So you could get every luxury brand, but there wasn't much of it, you know, and then you have like denim curations and things, but you didn't have anything that was sourced with a lot more depth of research. So I would travel to LA, go to LA market, I would go to New York, and I discovered brands in their first season, which, you know, I loved. Like we had Mansour Gabriel in their first season when they were showing Under the Bridge in Brooklyn. I had Zimmerman when they only did swimwear. We were selling organic beauty products that were sold in a fridge in 2006, you know? So I loved that part of my job. And then it also was a stepping stone to prepare me to how to present my collection to buyers in my next stage. So basically I kind of understood, when do they show, what does a line sheet really look like, what the pricing in terms of wholesale, and what does RRP mean, and, you know, how do you mark this up? And then I learned a lot about what I enjoyed from brands and what I thought was tricky, and basically applied this to my brand when I launched. So really understanding the size of the collections, how you present, what was intimidating, what made me want to buy a brand, what made me not buy a brand, you know, and kind of took all of these little details and applied them to Racil when I launched.
So tell me about, I love how you call it Racil 1.0. And
it's 1.0 is pre-COVID, 2.0 is post-COVID. I'm almost in a 3.0 because I'm coming full circle.
Which is super exciting. But yeah, so if we start with that first iteration, like you were saying, it really was all about the tuxedo and evening wear, and a very alternative modern form of evening wear. So tell me about that concept and all those lessons that you applied, if there were things that you were really specific about how you wanted to present that brand in its first kind of iteration.
You know, it was actually such an exciting moment of my life and my career as a designer, because I started from absolute scratch and really not knowing what I had to do, because then you realize that is a part that you don't learn in college. You know, no one told me, how do you build a brand? How do you become an entrepreneur? How you do this? So I had the idea of the brand doing tuxedos for women initially when I was putting together my wish list for the new season. And I was looking at magazines and thinking, what do I need and what do I need to add to my wardrobe? And thought I need a new black blazer. At the time, I literally wore a black jacket over everything, even on a bohemian dress. And I came up with the idea of tuxedos thinking, wait, that could be a great upgrade to my jacket. And I can't find anything in the market that's selling this. Of course, you find it at Tom Ford, at Dolce, you find it in the big guys at YSL, but not at a realistic price point or fit that worked for me. So I thought that there was something there to develop. And so I dove into that world, and the world of Yves Saint Laurent and Bianca Jagger and Studio 54 and the suits and all of that. And I literally went on that little trip, and I launched my collection about 15 months after. And it was a capsule of 16 SKUs, mostly black, different shapes of jackets, pants that you could mix and match everything together. And I applied everything that I learned from there on, where I looked at my brand. And when I worked on my branding, that was important for me, because I remember looking at a label. If I wasn't sure if I wanted to buy a brand or not, I would look at the label. And if I liked it, then I went for it. And if the label felt weak, then I didn't buy the brand. That was always something for me. So label and branding, which has evolved now with 2.0, but essentially that was a main part. How I did my line sheets, how I did my pricing, and then essentially kind of analyzing the market and the prices around and where I felt I wanted to be, at a price that felt still luxury, but decent enough that it's not too intimidating.
That's quite interesting, because everyone talks about, the price point, the vision that they had, but not so much the labels on the clothes, or even what you were putting on your line sheets and presenting to buyers. So was there, in terms of the graphics that you were using, references and kind of things that you were looking at when it comes to that side of putting together the brand?
There was. I'm very visual. So for me, I needed everything to look good. So even when I did a line sheet and people told me, you can just extract it from the system, the system that we use. I'm like, no, it doesn't look good. We're going to design this from scratch. So for me, it was very important for things to always look good. The logo, I think, is something that has evolved and will probably evolve again. It was probably representative of how I felt at the time. Very feminine, but also very shy. It was very thin, but I worked on it with someone who studied typography in Japan and would read my logo sideways instead of, looking at it. And I thought that was very interesting. So a lot of all this visual was important to me, incorporating Polaroids. And this is something that I also reflected in my lookbooks. I shot a different campaign with every season. At the time, it was also in parallel with the line and what I did and what my life was about. But we shot in every private club or nightclub that you could think of, within, not a party girl, but a girl that was seen partying a lot. So we had, I shot Annabelle Dexter-Jones at Castel in Paris, and then we shot Ella Richards at L'Escargot in Soho, and we shot everywhere from Mars clubs to Annabelle's to Sketch to Chiltern.
Amazing. So it was really about going out and embracing the tuxedo as evening wear, which is
completely
so incredible. And like you were saying, of course, there's that heritage of Saint Laurent and the smoking, but the market maybe is still quite limited when it comes to women's tailoring. Why do you think that is?
Because women's tailoring in general is, I'm going to say something that might come as a shock. For me, women's tailoring is awful. And that's probably why I went into this. It's not something that I like. When I go to a brand and they have feminine tailoring, I don't like it. I love very feminine dresses, and that I, absolutely adore. But for me, it was mostly about going into men's wardrobe, stealing their best iconic suit and making it feminine rather than trying to create a feminine version. I think that's where the sex appeal for me is and what made it more fun. So I think you'll find a lot of more female, women's tailoring in specific brand, but they will often fall into a slightly older, more corporate look. Whereas I wanted the look to be more fun, more easy, more sexy. For me, tuxedos then developed into suiting, then developed into single item jackets. And I still wear a jacket practically all the time. For me, I see it as a shield. I feel very protected when I have a jacket on. And I think the idea was to really just make it more easy, more relaxed, and give you the idea of a no-brainer uniform. If you're busy and you want to go somewhere, then you can just wear a suit with trainers and a T-shirt, go out, you look good, you look put together, you look stylish enough. And
I
that's
couldn't
it.
agree more.
But if you look at it, look at the jacket you're wearing, the jacket I'm wearing, most people you'll see, we're now wearing them in a very relaxed way. A woman who's going to wear a woman's suit is going to look a lot more formal, it's going to look more corporate, it's going to look more serious.
Exactly.
And for me, we've stolen this from the men's wardrobe. We might as well just keep it a little bit like that.
Yeah, and it's those tiny details, whether it's the shoulder or the boxy fit, but you can't find it. Like you say, I love that kind of shape as well, but it's not easy to find. So you really found a sweet spot. And I guess that's why there was such a response straight away. I remember kind of all the different colors of your suits. And when it first launched, there was almost like an army of women that started wearing them. So tell me about that experience, like post-launch, finding your customer and the feedback that you were getting.
That was actually quite surreal because it really did pick up really quickly, and we did color right away. And I guess unexpected color combinations that people really reacted to very well. I had a pink tuxedo with a yellow lapel or a blue one with a green lapel. You really couldn't find this at the time. And it was quite bold of me, but people loved it. And they were like, wait, this is such a fun way to wear a suit. And so I developed this in a very organic way, this little community of women that just loved the fit, because I developed the fit with a Savile Row tailor. So my fits I knew were really good, were based on men's codes, I would say. And then we turned them into women's suits that you could produce in factories. And, there was a really nice sort of following of these women that loved it. And I remember going to organizing a pop-up in Hong Kong and meeting this client who came and she said, oh, I have so many of your suits. And I was like, where from? She said, oh, I buy them all on matches. She owned maybe 5 colors or something. And that is nice. It just happened organically without me doing any kind of seeding or specific push.
And you mentioned working on Savile Row as well, but where did you find the right fabrics, the right factories? Because I guess, especially as an independent brand, that's a huge challenge to find the right partner, work with your quantities and make it all happen, I guess.
Absolutely. It is a challenge to kind of source everything and understand and compare. And I think that's a process that's never ending. I'm still I was looking at new fabrics today. You're constantly sourcing better price, better quality. And you're always looking for better factories, also better price, and then who can deal with your quantities, etc. So I think at the beginning, a friend of mine who also owns a fashion brand, whom I love dearly, told me, you have to go for this. I said, how do I start? And he gave me the number of one woman in Paris. And I called her up. And she connected me to someone who then connected me to someone else. And I sort of picked up a thread and went there. And one day I remember finding myself in a car in the middle of nowhere in France with a man that I had met 10 minutes before, going to a factory thinking, I'm out of my mind. I don't know who this person is and where I'm going. And you kind of start like this. I found one factory that promised they would develop, produce, and everything. And then that factory went under. So then I had to start again. And then I found a factory here. Then I found a factory in Romania. Then I went to all of the different fabric fairs. So I go to PV, Première Vision in Paris mostly, and then the one here, because I love British wools. And so it just started like that. You kind of embark on a research journey and you see who you get along with.
I guess it's the entrepreneurial journey and the adventures that no one gets to see behind the scenes.
No, exactly. I was reading this quote literally yesterday that said being an entrepreneur is jumping off a plane and building a parachute on your way down. And it's literally this. Because some days I wonder, do I even know what I'm doing? Do other people even know what they're doing? Or do you just wing it and try to make the best decision you can at that moment in time every day and just hope for the best?
It requires so much courage, and I think it is really interesting to hear that side of it as well, because especially in fashion, you just look at the sparkle and the glitz and the glam, and people fail to remember that you were in a car with a stranger somewhere in France trying to find a factory to make your clothes.
Exactly. And you really have this, I think I looked at this and I was thinking about it the other day, and it is the life of an entrepreneur and of a very hands-on business owner where, one day you're out and you've had your hair done and you're wearing a dress from your collection and you put your heels and you show up to a dinner and you're meeting clients and you're doing all of this. And the next morning you're up at 6, you're on the tube for 2 hours to go to a factory. By 7 a.m., you're looking at patterns, at fabrics, you're developing things, and then you come back and then you switch up again.
Yeah. So since we're on that kind of the side that's more challenge and it requires more courage, tell me, what were the the challenges that you kind of had to face as the brand was developing? Because, I mean, it does sound you found such a sweet spot. You had incredible customers from the beginning, great product. What were the hurdles that you had to overcome as sort of you were growing and things were getting more and more, the stakes were getting higher?
I don't even know if I've overcome them all or if they're just constant.
I'm sure you've already overcome plenty.
You go through them, and I look at this, I think for me it's as if you're in a train with lots of different carriages, and every carriage is a different part of your business you have to deal with. And you enter a tunnel and then you see the light and you're like, great, we're out of here. And then you enter another tunnel and it's a never-ending road. Some of the main challenges, I would say, was probably when I first started, and even now, I studied fashion design and marketing. I consider myself a completely creative entrepreneur. I love creating businesses and concepts, but my mind is not about building the business. It's more about creating and design and everything. So that was one of my main challenges, where I'm terrible with finance. I'm terrible with dealing with this. So, that is a challenge of being able to look at how do I build a business from scratch and not just work on a passion project. So assessing everything that you need, putting that down on paper, and kind of like dealing with all the different facets and all your different jobs as a founder. You're essentially everything. You're your CFO, CMO, CEO, you're creative, you head of logistics, you're packing boxes, you're posting on Instagram, you're doing everything. But the challenges, I guess, were the structure and the setup, the things, like I said, that they don't teach you at college, that you are trying to figure things out. So understanding what your cash flow is, understanding how that works with your supply chain. As a fashion business, you are at some points working on 3 collections at the time, and therefore you are spending on 3 collections at a time before you get paid. So this is a long process, and you need to manage that cash flow super carefully. And then it's also, you are responsible for your employees. So how do you now suddenly become a boss? And how do you deal with that in the best possible way? How do you support your team to grow? How do you empower them? And then everything else that you're dealing with on a day-to-day, so you're pulled in every corner. The pandemic was a specifically hard hurdle that we all had to deal with, so everyone had to deal with that, and it wasn't easy on anyone. But as a business owner that's completely independent and completely self-funded, with a team of 12 in a big office in Notting Hill, suddenly it's like someone pulled out the plug, right? And you just are there on your own thinking, how am I going to navigate this? And so we went through stages. I kind of did my list of, okay, how are we going to manage this? And that was probably one of the hardest times, because you're also secluded from everyone. So from when I started, I always worked with people. And suddenly I was home on my own, and I didn't see my team anymore, and I didn't see my office anymore. And that was really bothersome, to just suddenly be on your own, but having to give them the support that they needed. So, the first stage was kind of assessing all of the cancellations, trying to, minimize your losses where you can. I probably would have taken decisions differently if I didn't feel like I was so much under pressure.
Yeah. And by that time you were working with a lot of wholesale accounts.
We had
right?
about 50 accounts across 42 countries. And out of those 50 accounts, you probably had 5 that stuck to their word. And the other 45 were like, there's a pandemic, we're not picking up our order, bye, and would hang up the phone. And it hit in March. So if you remember, that time is when you're delivering spring, summer.
So you had already paid and produced the collection.
As a company paid and, developed, shown, paid, produced everything, and everything was in boxes ready to go. And people are like, no, we're not taking it. So I guess I probably should have thought about it more and played the long game and said, I'm going to hold on to this stock. I can sell it next summer. But you just didn't know what was going to happen the next day. And at that point, you're in survival mode and crisis control. So I did my best to sell it where I could. And then I had to deal with my team. So I had 12 people. I didn't know whether they were going to go, how long this was going to last. So I had one person at the time who I'm grateful for, who was working with me on the business side. And she was like, Racil, we need to let some people go. Otherwise, we're not going to be able to pay them next month. We're not getting paid. And then I said, we're going to wait until the end of the summer. So summer, I took to kind of switch off and figure things out. And then end of the summer, I realized that everyone that canceled their buys, I wasn't going to propose anything to them again because I was worried that they would let me down again. So I just kept the 5 accounts that, were loyal, and I worked with them, and, including Net-a-Porter and Matches, and those were some of our biggest accounts anyway. But their order contraction was 80%. I thought they would order maybe 50%, but the contraction was so big that we couldn't keep the rest of the team. So then it was me plus one person who helped me out with a few aspects of the business, and we tried to keep it afloat. Being Lebanese, to add to all of this, there was the explosion in 2020, which basically kind of like was the, putting the nail on the coffin of me thinking, okay, I'm done. I can't think straight anymore. And I feel like I had a moment of burnout, emotional burnout of this is too much for me to handle on my own. And without realizing, I guess I took a step back, simply because I just wasn't being creative anymore. So it took me a moment to kind of get back into things. And then I think a year and a half later, I realized that this is what I really wanted to do. I had that moment where I woke up and I'm like, okay, now what? Seeing people saying, are you not designing anymore? When's your next collection? We miss it. We want it. And I questioned, do I do this? Do I continue? Do I go do something else? And then I said, you know what, this is my purpose. I love what I do, and I'm grateful. And if anything, I'm going to take all of my learnings, and I'm going to use the excuse of COVID as a reset and do a 2.0 that feels a lot more in line with my authentic self rather than what I felt I had to do. I think 1.0, I did a lot of what I thought I had to do. 2.0, I'm doing a lot more of what I think works for the brand.
Yeah, if there's anything about the Lebanese is that you are some of the most resilient people in the world.
Exactly.
So I'm not surprised that you could pick up again and press restart. Tell me, what were the things that you were saying before that you were doing, what you felt you had to do? When you were ready to kind of start again, what did you say? I'm not going to do this again, and this is what's more authentically me, and that's how I'm going to do things now. So what were some of those changes that you were making?
So I felt like post-COVID, this 2.0, I felt like my comeback as a person, I was a little bruised, but I was a lot stronger, and the changes were more about being self-honest, and being very authentic and really telling myself, do I love this, or did I do this dress because someone asked me to do this? Do I love this jacket, or am I doing it because that's what's expected of me? In 1.0, my business was 95% wholesale. So anything my buyers told me, I always really took at heart. And if someone would come and tell me, oh, you need a mini dress version of this, look at this dress from that brand that's selling so well, I would do that. And next season, I'd be like, I don't want this dress. And then it doesn't sell. And it makes sense because it doesn't resemble me. So in this stage, I'm no longer doing things like that. I'm really being super honest to myself, authentic in my message, and actually looking at what do I want to build a business that I really have fun with, that I can build something that people can relate to, that make people happy, and that is not so serious because we're not saving the world. So I don't need to abide by certain rules and no, you cannot do this and you have to do this because this buyer is expecting this. And, when you show in Paris, they're so rigid about what they think fashion needs to be. Whereas I think that now we've evolved into something that's a little bit more laid back, more relaxed. And this feels more in line with how I am today. We now have a super cute studio. We used to be a team of 12. We're a team of 4. What we manage. We used to work 5 days a week, and some girls would stay in the office until midnight. We now work 4 days a week because for me, it's important to have a really good work-life balance. And actually, we managed to get it all done because everyone is really super dedicated to what they do in that way. I've also learned not to fall in certain traps. Whether it is people that sell you the dream saying, oh, you can sign with us on PR and communication. We're going to do this. This is going to do this. This is going to help sell this. Oh, we should donate a jacket to this charity because it's great visibility. None of this converts. So you realize today, I've learned what makes sense and what doesn't. And essentially, I'm taking this and I'm applying it to this 2.0 now. So I'm not doing this. If I do it, it's going to be in a very different way. Understanding what worked for me and what didn't. Understanding where we overspent, where we could have saved. What is essential to the business, what actually matters to the client or not. So it's my mind shifted from designing this passion project to building a business and going from having a pure ready-to-wear brand to more of a lifestyle experience. And that's where my story continues, and that's what I'm moving towards. And also this allows me to take a step back and think about what my Racil woman wants. What kind of wardrobe do you want today? I believe most of us shop very differently from pre-2020, and then you can see it. You can see it in the increase in the secondary market. You can see it in the increase in rentals, etc. So for me, I feel like today our purchases are mostly, we're either buying pieces that are very hardworking, like a great jacket that you're going to wear, and wear over and over, like a cool suit, or you're buying an emotional purchase. There's nothing much in between. And that's, what I want to go for. And so I'm having more like signature items that do really well for me, and also kind of like giving you great wardrobe solutions.
Talk a little bit about how the collections evolved and also your overall approach to design, your inspirations. You mentioned relaxing a little bit more. So yeah, what do those signatures, do they look different? How do the collections change?
So my brand, my DNA is still there. The tuxedos, the suiting, the tailoring, that essentially just sets the tone for the quality of the product that I aim to design, develop, produce, and sell. Starting with a base of tailoring and working with amazing tailors, let's say from Savile Row, means that I'm very much focused on the cut, on the quality of the fabrics. That will always be there. But things have evolved because we dress in a slightly more relaxed way. So my jackets are slightly more oversized than they used to be. My trousers are easy to wear in the day as well because I do a lot of cropped length, whereas before they were always long, so you always had to wear the heel with them, So, but I'm now building more of a what I call a trousseau. So this is how we're presenting drops moving forward. So moving forward, the brand is focusing a lot more on D2C and on 4 main drops a year. And every drop for me is what I call a trousseau. And a trousseau is an old French word from the 1800s that essentially means, when a girl got married and moved to her husband's home. We have this in Lebanon and in the Middle East. I'm sure you have that too.
Yeah.
Where your mother would prepare for you the trousseau, right? And it's essentially a shopping spree of everything that you want. And when I was in my early 20s, I wanted to get married only for that.
I was the same, actually. So you can get everything brand new.
You can get everything brand new, from your socks to your coat, And so for me, I love that concept. And so my drops now are modeled on that, on what is it that I need. My trousseau is essentially a great capsule collection that can work very hard with each other, that you can mix and match everything. And that's how I look at it. So my design, now I want to not only design and develop lots of options for wholesale, because that's what they expect from you. I want to design and develop what I feel fits within a trousseau, what a woman really needs, what we're going to sell well, what's going to be commercial, what's going to make you feel good without all of the extra fluff, and doing the edit for you. So I don't need to give you 15 dresses for you to choose from, because I also realized by doing pop-ups that women want support. They need help on how to wear things, on how to style things, etc. And when you give them an edit and you're like, this is it, this is so easy, this is your everyday jacket, this is your suit, you can wear it with this, with that. These are the 2 dresses you need. You need a good skirt. Well, you do the edit for them, you do the hard work for them. And they come back to you and they buy into the whole drop because you've given them a lot of different options that work together.
And this is what you meant, right, when you spoke about a lifestyle proposition versus seasonal collections that renew every year.
Exactly. So when I say Racil is moving more into a lifestyle, people think I'm going to start doing tableware.
Yeah.
For me, it's not necessarily that. It might come. But the idea is, no, I want to accompany my client throughout her lifestyle. So today, you're in London, you're busy, you have a job, you're taking the tube. I want to dress you for that, for your art event. But tomorrow, you are in the mountains and you need something a little bit, different for that kind of event. We'll have that within our winter drop. But the same woman tomorrow will go to Greece, we'll go to Lebanon, we'll go to south of France, we'll dress differently, we'll need more summer outfits. And that's what I want to offer her. And in the rigid rules, of buyers, they would always tell you, I don't know what department to put you in. If you're not doing only evening wear, then we know you go here. But I love, like I said, menswear and shopping in the men's department. And I think what men's brands have is that they offer a 360, 12-month option for their clients. Men will often go, except for swimming trunks, to the same brand throughout the year. We don't have that luxury because we rarely have brands that we can connect with summer and winter or spring and fall. So you'll go to one brand for your coats, your jacket, and then another one because they do good summer dresses. I want to follow you throughout your lifestyle and give you all of these solutions for every facet of your life, for every different facet of you as a woman, so that you can have everything that you need. And you can come to us as a trusting friend and say, okay, what do I need now? And find what you need, and then you can build on that.
That was Racil Chalhoub, womenswear designer and founder of fashion label Racil. And that's all for today's show. Make sure you subscribe and stay tuned. We have more big interviews coming from next week. Today's episode was produced and edited by Lily Austin. I'm Natalie Theodosi. Thank you so much for listening.